This is Nithya, and you're listening to Food in Canada, the podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Nithya, your host and the editor of Food in Canada. Today's podcast is brought to you by National Sunflower Association. US-grown sunflower kernels are gaining popularity among Canadian food manufacturers looking to meet consumer demand for clean label, plant-based, and allergen-friendly foods. As consumers increasingly seek wholesome ingredients and balanced nutrition, sunflower kernels offer a versatile solution for bakery, snack, and plant-based applications. Naturally nutrient-dense, they provide protein, fiber, healthy fats, and other key nutrients while supporting the use of non-GMO, minimally processed ingredients. To learn more or find a supplier, visit sunflowernsa.com. Joining me on the podcast today are Julie Istead, Vice President of R&D at Puratos, and Reid McEachran, International Marketing Manager of Ardent Mills. Today, we'll be discussing how the trends of both fiber and protein maxing are impacting the baked goods sector. Now, as most of you must know, Canadian baked goods manufacturers are under pressure to offer more fiber, more protein, more functionality, and more nutrition without sacrificing the taste and texture consumers expect in every bite. Now, there are too many mores there, Julie and Reid, and it seems like a lot to expect from a single product. What do you both think?
Well, I think consumers are really interested in high protein and high fiber items. They are looking, and they're more knowledgeable about what goes into their food than ever before. And we've seen from our own taste, from our research, that consumers are looking for nutritious and satisfying products that can help with either their fitness goals or even their own, life goals. But the biggest thing is it still has to taste great, which is one of the things that, we'll talk about today too. But it's a really important part. Both of those things are an important part of a healthy diet. So it's an interesting topic.
Absolutely. Reid, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we at Ardent Mills really see that consumers are strongly looking for best value for their serving portion. So as you mentioned, it means that the flavor, the texture, the eating experience has to be there, but there needs to be benefits. There needs to be a payoff for that eating experience. So you have to be able to balance that fiber, that protein, those claims, all while encapsulating the right sensory experience. And our research has shown that benefit stacking is the newest thing coming to light, where consumers are looking for the most different benefits in each eating experience. Our research shows that consumers typically look for about 8.6 different eating behaviors while they're making decisions. So what that means for the manufacturing space and ultimately the retail space is that you need options that are clean label, that are high protein, high fiber, have whole grains, gluten containing, gluten free, and really balance these as best as possible to be able to meet consumers where they're looking to shop.
Absolutely, yes. Now, what sort of ingredients are available for baked goods manufacturers to use when creating products that probably they're high in protein and fiber or, high in multiple things?
The great news for producers now, as opposed to maybe 5 or 10 years ago, is that there's lots of options out there. And there's quite a few ingredients that can deliver both protein and fiber. So things like legumes, so peas, fava beans, lentils, rice, soy, and grains and seeds. So seeds like millet or sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, all of those things add both protein and fiber. They also add lots of texture, which consumers really love. So I think, when you're looking at a healthier bread or baked good, having that textural difference is really important. So, a crunchy outside and then, those grains inside, and you can put them in the bread. You can put them on top of the bread. We can talk about the technical challenges a little bit later about each of those, but the great news is that there are way more options, and the food ecosystem in Canada has put a lot of investment into different forms of those ingredients. So whether you're talking about protein concentrates or isolates or the actual material itself, there's lots of options for producers these days.
Reid, you're based in Calgary, so closer to the breadbasket, I would say. I mean, What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Julie. When you think about considering protein and fiber, when coming from the ingredient space, we look at flour. Functional flour is all about having the right base for manufacturers to develop on. So for that, it's things like sorghum flour, it's things like chickpea flour, whole wheat or whiter whole wheat flours can be tremendous ways to have a good base to be able to get that right texture from your starting formulation and be able to incorporate these concepts of higher protein, higher fiber into the products. But pulses overall are really having a big movement, and we're seeing that over a number of years, and consumers are becoming more and more educated and understand how to read ingredient lists and nutritional facts panels more than ever to be able to make their own informed decisions. So being able to get those, even if it's 1, 2, or 3 gram bumps in protein or fiber can be a massive unlock to achieving demand for your products.
So when I was at Bakery Showcase earlier this year, Reid, I think it was Ardent Mills. You had a chickpea blend, and they were offering samples. The texture and the taste was pretty similar to regular wheat flour as well. So it was interesting to see that on display at Bakery Showcase.
Absolutely. And I think it's just a testament to the science of where the baking industry has come to, because when we employ things like roasting or temperature control or these variances in the manufacturing process from the ingredient side, you can achieve very different taste and texture outcomes, which is a tremendous unlock for the food world in Canada.
Julie, to your point, it's not as simple as replacing white flour with one of these specialized flours. There are some technical challenges. So I was wondering if you could expand on that.
Sure. So bakers are very used to using wheat flour and, the amount of water and the hydration and the mixing times that you need with using regular flour. But when you add different types of proteins, they all have different needs in hydration, mixing time, and then each of them also have a different effect on your crumb texture, the amount of rise, and of course, we talked about taste earlier. So we have to make sure that we're adding things that taste good. And I think that's been a big challenge up until now. But now that, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of options there. And what we found works best is using a variety of ingredients to help you achieve the protein claim you want. And when we talk about protein claims, it's also really important for people to understand the regulatory landscape, because depending on where you're selling your product, it has very different requirements for how to make that protein claim. So I would just recommend people look closely at what's required, whether it's in Canada that you want to sell it, or maybe a lot of people export to the US or to Europe, and make sure that you know what you're targeting before you start. I would also say it's important when you're having these technical hurdles, find a partner that you trust and that you have a good relationship with. Puratos, of course, or Ardent Mills, both of us can help, really help you navigate both of those, whether it's nutritional, operational, formulation, and regulatory.
Julie, are you able to give me some sort of an example? You say use a variety of sources to get that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So you can add, just as an example, you can add so things inside the bread. So you can add, soy grits as an example. You can add, chickpea, as Reid mentioned, or you can try, there's so many that I couldn't mention them all, fava bean concentrates, but then also try adding things on the top. So if you're talking about a bread, you can do a topper on it with maybe sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, and there's really interesting seeds and grains out there, amaranth and millet and all kinds of things. So to add that visual interest, and then you can get your nutritional profile from a variety. And then you're also, if you add things like sourdough and those kind of flavors to your bread, you're really making it great tasting bread and not just a high protein bread. So that's what my advice would be to people trying to formulate a high protein bread.
Reid, from your experience, one of the concerns that often comes up is digestibility when you're using a lot of plant-based protein sources. How are Ardent Mills flours, addressing that aspect of this issue?
Yeah, it's an excellent topic, Nithya, because as yourself and Julie have mentioned, the PDCAS, the protein digestibility factor of different pulses and different pulse flours can vary from supplier to supplier, can vary from crop to crop dramatically. So I think one of the best things to do is to really lean on supplier partners, like Puratos, like Ardent Mills, and look at their sensory science teams and look at their teams for the best knowledge, because they'll have done the studies on the particular varieties of chickpea, let's say, that they're bringing in, and so can help give you the best nutritional data. And they've done a lot of work to understand how that specific crop variety is going to perform. So as you start to think about, incorporating things like whey protein isolates or whey protein concentrates, their teams are going to have the best data and the best resources to help you incorporate those ingredients with some of those base functional flours like that, they will have a level of protein that's higher than wheat flour, let's say, but to your point, the digestibility is not going to be at 100%. So it's about creating that right balance between that protein claim and the sensory quality. And in one of our opinions, it starts strongly with that base as an ingredient.
What are some of the technical challenges or hurdles that you've encountered, your team's encountered, and been able to help manufacturers address as well?
Yeah, I'd say when working with protein ingredients, looking at product structure, that can vary. Sometimes when incorporating ingredients that have that higher protein density, they can be a little bit drier, or they can be a little less soft or a little less in volume than expected when using kind of a conventional wheat flour or a conventional baked good as a proxy or comparison. So I think it really comes to leveraging the science and understanding those hydration levels that those pulse flours or those protein ingredients need. As in the wheat space, or the moisture content of wheat flour is standardized around 14.5%. Whereas as soon as you're bringing in lots of different ingredients, they'll have various moisture levels. So ultimately, your hydration is going to need to be changed to be able to make sure that you end up with a similar moisture profile overall at the end of that baking process.
Yeah. And I also imagine elasticity would be a concern, right? For some products, a certain type of elasticity would be needed. Julie, can you expand a little bit on that? Like, I'm sure bagels require a different level, right? Than regular bread.
Each product's a little bit different in sort of your, I'll call it standard formulation. And then when you add protein, and that hydration level plays into the elasticity, they all work together. And also you have to adjust your mixing because, they hydrate at a different rate and a different level. They also if you're using pieces of proteins, like a soy grit as an example, it can actually interrupt your gluten structure. So it can't retain the gas as well, which causes that reduced volume. So it takes a lot of trial and error to find the perfect formula that works with the product that you want to develop. But exactly as Reid mentioned, I would suggest, use the partners that you have, because it's a very deep field of scientific research. So each, supplier will have that knowledge to guide you and what can help you in your operation. And then it's a whole other story when you go to actually producing them at, high volume, from lab to scale up. So trial and error, the typical R&D process. Keep trying till you find the great process for you.
I was speaking earlier this year to folks at Dentsters, Bimbo, Canada, when they launched their new line of protein, which, like just how you recommended, Julie, uses the multiple sources of protein to arrive at that level that they wanted to offer. And the R&D personnel was telling me about how it took them over a year to come up with a perfect product formulation that can be scaled up at the level that they wanted to be scaled up.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, you work with manufacturers all the time. So what are some test case scenarios, some struggles that manufacturers have shared with you and how they overcame those struggles? Reid, anything that you'd like to share?
For sure. Yeah, I think it's ultimately about strategic ingredient selection. One of the big things we see is instead of relying on kind of that single source of flour or a protein blend, it's looking at customized ingredient solutions being a really interesting way to help overcome some of the challenges we've talked about in getting that right density, that right structure, and ultimately the right sensory experience. So I think partnering with those companies who can bring you an ingredient solution per se, not necessarily different ingredients altogether, but can help optimize both the nutritional side of things, but the performance. And I think the advances in technology that the industries are making around the functionality of these ingredients will help manufacturers ultimately deliver those higher protein levels to higher fiber levels with less compromise as it comes to taste and texture in the eating experience.
Absolutely. Julie, what are some of the stories that manufacturers have shared with you?
It's definitely all the things I mentioned already is often freshness. We haven't talked a lot about freshness or like the shelf life, but that, that dry crumb, how can you make it last still as long in the store as a standard loaf of bread, and taste. There are some, I think consumers, there's different consumers out there that want different things, but most mainstream customers still want it to taste great. So getting that balance of, I still have a great sandwich bread or toast or a bagel or pizza dough. It tastes, freshness, and also that operationally works for them, because we can't forget, producers still need to be able to manufacture these breads in a cost-effective way.
That's so true. With some protein ingredients being at such high demand and the supply being so low, they're juggling a lot, the manufacturers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice on that front?
If you're working with a supplier that supplies a specific type of protein or fiber ingredient that you're looking for, keep talking to them and let them know where you are in your development cycle, so you can make sure that you can get that when production time comes. Because I have seen that in businesses, and maybe Reid, you have as well, is that development cycle can be long. So and supply, as you mentioned, Nithya, it can be a problem for some ingredients, but that's where it helps to have multiple sources. So you're not looking for a really large volume of one thing. You have smaller volumes, and that helps your vendors to provide for you. Also, have secondary supplier, not even suppliers, but kind of a backup solution. I've seen that a lot of people do that as well, where, okay, if I can't get this one, I'll use a different one, because that's the reality of the world that we live in today, is that we do have supply chain challenges. So try to have secondary supply or a formula ready when you get going. That would be some advice I'd give.
Thank you. Reid, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think partnership is so important. And I think the best way to look at this from our perspective is, if you look 10 or 15 years ago in the gluten-free baked industry, we've come a very long way since then. Those products 10 or 15 years ago had a very different taste, flavor, sensory experience. And where they are now is much closer to parity. And that didn't happen through any partner or any specific individual kind of working in silos, but it came together because the industry worked together. And we found what ingredients worked best together, how to best get them to rise and get them to perform the way that we all expect them to from a baked good. And I think that partnership is how we accomplish that, because each organization, each group, each step of the supply chain will achieve one part of the puzzle. And when you put those all together, you can get much closer to parity in baking. And so I think we're a little bit earlier on in the proliferation phase here when it comes to high protein and high fiber, but partnership can be the key pathway for us to get there and accomplish a similar path to what has happened in the gluten-free baking industry.
Julie, you mentioned operational challenges that need to be addressed. What are some of them?
As R&D people know, when you do something in the lab and then you scale it up for either high-speed production or just general, larger batches, nothing is exactly the same. So, and the things I mentioned is getting that dough texture right, that goes through your line. Every operation has something that's a little bit unique. So do lots of trials and work your way through it. But yeah, I would say hydration, gluten structure, getting the rise, and also color. That's another interesting one as well, is sometimes you can get more color than you're used to or less color. So you may have to add a few other ingredients to help you with that. But yeah, the same challenges, just trying to scale them up.
Yeah, I think one of the things we haven't really spoken about yet in this conversation that's interesting is while we're kind of working on improving formulations, there's also this shift to a clean label friendly or a cleaner label movement that we're seeing. So while we're doing all this development, there's a strong push from industry, consumers, manufacturers to make ingredient lists more consumer friendly, more recognizable ingredients, more legible. And so that can be as simple as, switching to an unbleached flour or an unchlorinated flour or things like that. But I think there's a huge push behind that as consumers do become more educated and spend more and more time critiquing and critically reviewing these ingredient lists. So I think there's a strong element to how can we accomplish the goals of protein and fiber, but also do it in a way that we're also being conscious of the ingredients that we're using and what we're putting on our ingredient lists.
That's one of the things that I did bring up with Dempster's when I was chatting with them. I mean, they're using so many protein sources to achieve a certain level, and the ingredient list is long, but still clean. So I'm left wondering, how is the consumer accepting and how is the consumer reacting to it? Do you have any thoughts, Julie?
Yeah, I think Reid brings up a very good point around clean label is, consider that while you're doing the formulation work is, can you maybe get rid of an emulsifier or some other non-clean ingredient? But I think consumers, they want to understand what's in their food. So, something like seeds and grains and flours, they understand that on their ingredient statement. So even though it might have a little bit longer ingredient statement, they understand what the things are that are in that bread or in that product. So I think accessibility or that idea of it, can you find it in your cupboard, is still very, very prominent for consumers. They want to understand what's in their food. So transparency, and even the protein claim is it's quite difficult actually to achieve a true protein claim in Canada, but being able to see precisely how many grams of protein is and have it on the front of pack, they understand that. So transparency is important to the consumer.
One of the things that I do want to touch upon is that, are we at a point where there's some sort of a fatigue? Because we see every other day a new product being launched that's either high in protein or either high in fiber or both. Mm-hmm. Is there a fatigue? I mean, are consumers getting turned off?
I don't think so on protein. I think they've come to expect that and look for that in their foods. So whether they're picking up a waffle or a bread or something, they're turning over the package and they're looking to see how much protein, how much fiber am I getting in my food. So I don't think it's fatigue yet. I think they're a little more savvy, though. Again, back to the transparency piece. They want things that are understandable. So I don't think it's fatigue yet. Reid, I'm not sure from a marketing perspective what your thoughts are, but I think we're not there yet.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we're at that point yet. I think there's a lot to be said about building the credibility of brands by, as I mentioned, hitting that benefit stacking, right? Making sure you're getting the most different benefits that you can, so you're meeting consumers at the variety of places that they are. One of the really interesting studies we did about 4 months ago now was we looked at how consumers are eating, how they're changing their eating behaviors. And what our data showed us is that 74% of consumers had changed their eating behaviors in the last 3 months. And of that, about 50% of that was geared to better or smarter overall to improve health and wellness. And so obviously that is going to have different meanings to different people along the way. But as Julie mentioned, if you can help increase the protein content on the nutritional facts panel or the fiber content and that fiber count, then you're going to be helping consumers just understand, well, what does this baked good do for me for my overall daily servings, the daily values that I'm looking to achieve. And so I think that's the key here to helping avoid fatigue, is just recognizable, trustable, and making it easy for consumers to be able to count exactly what they're putting in their bodies day in, day out.
We haven't really touched upon, you've mentioned it, but I think despite all of these claims, the singular most important thing for a consumer to go back and pick up a product is taste and texture, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
absolutely. Sometimes in the early part of a trend, consumers are willing to maybe flex a little bit to get what they're looking for. Or if you have, particularly in the protein and fiber space, if you have somebody who's like an athlete or a real fitness enthusiast, then they might be able to flex a little bit in what they're looking for so they can get that really high protein count. But I believe that most mainstream consumers want something that tastes good. And they just want to be able, how can I easily incorporate more protein into my daily diet so I can either address any health concerns or just feel better, just, be more healthy and feel better. And this, I think it's really not going anywhere. We see with the whole GLP-1 coming, people are eating less food, and so the food that they're eating, they want it to be exactly like Reid mentioned. It's that benefit stacking. I want to get multiple things into my food so that I can feel good about the food that I'm eating. And even things like treats and those little sweet treats and the things, you see those smart snacks where they're like a gummy treat, but they have less sugar, or a muffin that has more fruit. So there's lots of ways that consumers change how they eat.
And then front of packaging is helpful for them as well, because it kind of puts it right on your face whether this product is high in sugar or fat or sodium. So yeah.
Yeah, I think throughout this whole trend of high protein and fiber, one of the things we're seeing rise to the top is snacking, right? It's consumers are looking to snack more, and we're actually seeing snacking rise a little bit. And comes along with that is portion size and being able to create these health by self products where you leverage, for example, the power of pulses or some slightly higher protein content in a product that consumers know and love that can help them achieve their daily goals. But at the end of the day, as Julie mentioned, for the mainstream consumer, it has to taste great. And so that's the key here, is that the ingredient has to have a good benefit, but for it to work, it has to have that recognizable taste, that exact brand trust that they're looking for, because we're all not willing to compromise at the end of the day.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, texture and taste really matters. And I agree with you. The recent Mondelez's State of Snacking report spoke about how snacking has expanded. People are snacking more and having more snacks and less meals. So portion sizes matter, and they definitely want more from each bite as well. Well, on that note, just want to have a quick question about how you both see this trend evolving in the next 3 to 4 years.
Sure. I don't see it going anywhere. I think I see it incorporating, this into more, expanding beyond the bread aisle into other categories. And I think that producers will get better at incorporating it in more easily into our products. So I don't see it going anywhere. And fiber itself has not really gone anywhere. It's been around for quite a long time, the concept of having more fiber in your diet. And so I see it sticking around for quite a while.
But are there any production or capacity gaps within the Canadian food and beverage ecosystem that needs to be addressed? Because this trend is here to stay.
I don't know about capacity as far as, actual, I'll call it production capacity, but there is technical knowledge that we're still building on the ingredient side. And I see and I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of investment from the Canadian food ecosystem to invest in Canadian ingredients. We grow so many amazing grains and seeds in Canada and using them in all forms. So I think that knowledge, I've seen some really interesting research into canola proteins and hemp proteins, sunflower protein, so that there's more and more research being done into finding these, I'll call them novel protein ingredients. So as that technology and as that scientific research is done, I think we'll get better and better at incorporating those things into those products. So, and there's still lots of room for producers to produce things in Canada, and they're really looking for those new products to make.
Reid, are you seeing any capacity gaps that need to be addressed?
Yeah, I think overall we're very early in the innovation of this evolution for high protein and fiber. Not necessarily a capacity gap, but I think there's a potential for strong education for consumers and for people as a whole, right? We, as a technical industry, we understand a lot about these specific ingredients, but helping share the stories, the benefits, the reasons to believe in them, I think is crucial for consumers as we're going to roll them out and have them look to adopt them. For example, thinking about pulses can often have quite the sustainability story in addition to all the functional benefits they provide. So helping bring those forward can help increase the adoption of our new innovations, but also increase that repeat purchase, because we see that consumers want to shop sustainably while achieving their dietary goals too. So if we can help them do so, that'll be a huge unlock, and not necessarily a gap, but I think a continuing movement that we can help them achieve.
And Reid, do you see any changes in this trend?
I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we're early in this phase. I think we're going to see a lot more unique solutions come onto the market, and I think we're pretty early in that phase. Like I said, you're not seeing food service have as much option potentially as retail has. So I think we're going to see this evolve and shift into these fast casual experiences, into the fine dining experience world, where these are going to become more and more well known, and then what that's going to do is that eating experience, that taste, that texture is going to become more and more important, because we are all going to improve, and we're going to be much more well versed in what we're expecting from these eating occasions. That's where we're making those decisions.
Is there a reason why it hasn't yet expanded into food service at the level that probably it is at retail?
I think ultimately it comes down to time and energy. As Julie's mentioned, these can have very long cycles of innovation, and it takes time to take it from a corporate chef center, let's say, an innovation center, to rolling it out across 40 stores across the country, making sure that experience is the same, making sure production is replicated, or finding a partner who can help in production is key there. So there's a lot that industry has to account for in food service overall. I think we are for sure going to get there, and you're going to see things in the pizza space, in the bread space, or in this fast casual space that can really help consumers meet where they're looking to make their decisions. But to date, I think it's been that execution piece, and how can we make sure we're doing this at a scalable and enjoyable way.
Julie, any final thoughts on this trend?
Like I mentioned, I think it's here to stay. So I think we're going to get more and more used to it, and create an expectation of increasing our protein. So I'm very excited to see how the research comes together with consumer needs and producers. We love a good nutritional increase in our food. So we're looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't have a tracker these days and making sure you're hitting your macros every single day?
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I want to thank both you, Reid and Julie, for chatting with me today. I also want to thank our sponsor, the National Sunflower Association, for supporting today's podcast episode. US grown sunflower kernels are not only known for their versatility, premium quality, and impressive health profile, but they're also a cost-effective alternative to traditional nuts. With their low moisture content and adherence to strict food safety standards, US grown sunflower kernels are the ideal choice for bakery and snack manufacturers looking to create delicious, allergen-friendly, and wholesome products that align with today's consumer preferences for transparency, wellness, and balanced nutrition. Visit sunflowernsa.com to learn more or find a supplier. Thank you, Julie and Reid.
Thank you,
Nithya. Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was great to have you both. And thanks to our listeners for listening to this podcast. Have a good day. This has been Food in Canada, the podcast. Visit foodincanada.com for more episodes.